Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Way We Grow podcast, a production of the Craft Growers Network. I'm your host, Nick Wolfe. Today, our guest is Genevieve, also known as Miss Newty Grows on Instagram. Genevieve, how are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm doing really well. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Eastern Canada, and the snow is melting.
Nice. Yeah, I'm out in Western US and Oregon, and it is a dreary Oregon day out there. So
Oh,
I'm
okay.
jealous of the sun, actually, but it's
We
probably a little
do.
colder.
It is a little colder, but we do get a bit more sun in the winter time, I think, than you folks out there. Just based
For
on my
sure.
experience in BC, but
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, if it's anything like Seattle, then it's yeah, dreary and gray all the time.
yeah, fun fact is when I turned 40, which was almost 7 years ago now, my treat to myself, it was 2018 and California had just become recreationally legal. So I went down there for 420 to San Francisco with my Jeep that I currently have now, rented a pod, threw in the back, drove up to Victoria from Edmonton because that's where I was living, and then down the coast. So Oregon became one of my favorite places, and I definitely want to go back there because it was just like driving down that highway, that coastal highway through Oregon, like man,
Yeah,
gorgeous.
the drive through Oregon is a lot nicer, in my opinion, than the drive through California on, I think it's Highway
Yeah,
1, or
yeah,
I think it's sometimes 101.
yeah,
I get them
sometimes.
confused,
That's
but
why I didn't
um,
say it because I've only been down it once, so I don't
for
act
sure. And
like
I
a
I've
pro.
lived here my whole life, and I don't know, but it's
Yeah.
the parts in California can be kind of treacherous along some of those extremely like hairpin turnbacks through the hilly mountainside there. It's like all sheer cliffs and stuff, and I always get like a almost like a panic attack driving through there.
That's a lot like BC, and you're right. It was a lot like that. Like just we went through at night too, like those big redwoods. Just like all of a sudden you come up right up to one, and you could literally, if you're not paying attention, go right into it, which I'm sure happens all the time. But
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So, what's new in your grow world? I know that for a while there, I'm not sure if you're still working with the same commercial facility, but you kind of went from a home grower to a commercial grower in somewhat rapid succession, very close to around the same time that I did personally. So it was really fascinating to watch. But yeah, what's new in your grow world?
Thank you for watching. It's been exciting from what I hear to watch, but also to experience. So the quickest recap would be like pre 2018, I was a social worker working in the city of Edmonton in Alberta, which is on the western side of Canada. Kind of hobby growing and like blasting into the space so much that I moved into corporate cannabis. So jumped around in Alberta at a few spots, and then was transplanted out here for a really good opportunity and did that thing for a few years. It was like a crash course in in corporate cannabis, really. Like I was managing B2B sales, not just domestically but internationally. I helped basically mold and bring that team from, we were just little weaklings to like all the way up into all the best provinces in Canada as far as recreational, so BC and Ontario with the craft grower designation. I chose that pheno that was winning awards around Canada, the Daily Grape, and pretty much made the cultivation department what it is, that Daily Grape.
Awesome.
So much so that we had other partners, so as managing other micro cultivation sites across Canada, so as far as BC, so western to eastern allies, and then throughout Atlantic Canada. So when I moved out here, I got to travel everywhere in Atlantic Canada. So it's been a really cool experience. I did resign from that position at the end of last year because I was really burnt out, and that I just needed to recognize that. I'm an older lady, going to be 47 soon. And so I know and recognize those signs and symptoms, and I pushed through it for a good year, and honestly, like, built out that cultivation and post-harvest department. It was very successful. A grower's success really is like when you can't grow enough of the product that the people want, right? Like, that's a
Yeah,
problem in itself. But that was the biggest problem. So at that point, I
that's a good
passed the
problem to
crown
have.
down to the young man that I was mentoring, and he does amazing, and it's awesome. So that's kind of what I'd like to do continually, is just find another spot where I can learn things for myself. So I do have a specific list of things that I'd like to experience at scale, and make a little bit of money this time. I haven't done that yet. I've been working strictly for passion, and honestly, the best word I can use is raped it out of me. Like, my creativity, like, like, just a lot of things were intellectual property. Just like, you really learn lessons as you come up and in through any probably fast-paced, ever-changing industry with so many transient people. Like, the companies I worked for don't even exist in Alberta, like,
Yeah.
so and that was only a few years ago. So
I
it's
mean,
so
it sounds a
crazy.
lot like the restaurant industry.
Yeah,
Um,
a lot of
ju-
people compare it to that for sure. I used to work in hospitality and restaurants in the city of Edmonton, which is a huge, over a million people city. Funny enough, at Atlantic or East Coast bars, and I wasn't even from the East Coast, but now this is me. And yeah, it is. It's a lot like that. It's like, money is the number one thing, and it's ever changing and over regulated. I was working in the bar industry and serving industry when the rules were still a little bit more lax, and it was a little bit more fun, and there was culture to it, and this and that. And then it started getting over regulated, and I dipped out. And so coming back into that corporate scene has been a little bit trying at times, but you have to learn. What you do is you learn to work with that type of mindset and those types of people.
Definitely. Yeah, I was a chef for like 10 years and
Okay.
worked on the West Coast and the East Coast, and it is I feel like there's a lot of similarities because there's a lot of passion within the people that want to get into those industries.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like glamour as well in the restaurant industry, bar industry,
Yeah. Rock star
cannabis industry.
lifestyle.
Exactly. Like
Some of the
people have,
industry events, like, you probably know, that would get put out, red carpet events.
yeah,
Yeah, you're right.
yeah. They're very glamorous, and I feel like a lot of people think that you know by working hard or working with the right people that they're going to be the next sensation or have some sort of like big payout from just being raked over the coals consistently for years. But
And
usually I
honestly,
mean,
if
for the
you work
masses, that doesn't
towards
work.
those accolades, sorry for cutting you off, but if you just,
No,
I'm real steaming about it. If you work towards those accolades, for example, and win top grower 2023 in Canada, people don't give a shit in Canada. They're either telling you you're paying to play, which I didn't because I'm poor as F, and so was the company. Or you don't deserve it, right? So it's like, well, what
right,
do I need to show you to prove that I deserve this award? It's not based on just growing good weed. It's based on, like, leadership and other skills, right? So
right.
maybe, I don't know if it's just because I'm a female, but these accolades just get pushed aside. I've won awards for my strains and my Phenohunting, Canada wide and in New Brunswick and in Alberta when it was illegal. I was winning home grow awards, but people just don't care, So I don't usually mention them except on podcasts to validate myself.
For sure. Well, I think it is important to bring up what you were saying there is, accolades. There's like so much more to it at this point now where you have to be like marketing yourself and
Mm-hmm.
doing it in a very specific way to
It's
follow
exhausting.
whatever people are like wanting out of that, but that kind of reduces like the essence of why you're doing it in the first place, almost to to meet these demands of the consumer and the public, and it's not necessarily sustainable for like a mental state or a, even just like doing what you want to do or doing it because you have like the passion for it or something like that. It
Mm-hmm.
can be muddied very quickly that way, and yeah, it's hard to,
It's
if
hard
you're
to stay
chasing awards
authentic.
and stuff, it doesn't. Sorry.
It's hard to stay authentic. That's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing. Um, because there's no payoff for it. That's what the people
Sure.
say they want, and I've provided it, but there hasn't been much reward, whether it's the reward is likes or engagement or pay. Money would be nice, like it just hasn't been rewarding. So you scale back on that naturally as a creator because you want to get paid or you want some sort of win-win. I think most people probably. And so it's happening really fast too, where it's like almost, and I don't want to be associated as an influencer either, right? Like that's dangerous ground too with all these different documentaries coming about, not even cannabis related, but
Sure.
like I don't want to influence other people. I'm just trying to portray or show authentic life, just like these are the struggles of trying to get through this corporate world.
Right.
And this
I
is
mean,
what we do at the job that I'm at, wherever that job is. So before this job,
sure.
I was dancing in rooms with plants in a vertical spec. Like I'm looking for I guess, the next place to go dancing. And I've started to get some interest. So I have been looking at outdoor opportunities. And so relocation will probably be in my near future, the next couple of years. I've turned down a couple things already that just don't align. And when you've been in the industry, even though it's only been 6 years, it's a small, short, I guess, what am I trying to say? It's not a small industry, but it's a baby still. It hasn't been around that long. So the industry is
Right.
still really young. That's the word I'm looking for. But a lot has happened, right? And
Right.
so I guess I want to make sure that, yes, I'm jumping back into corporate cannabis, but I want to make sure that it's going to be something that I can also put some passion into as well, right?
For sure. Absolutely. I mean, if that's, I feel like everyone has their own sort of drive for what they're desiring in a position. If it's for, the unfortunate capitalistic means that we all are currently surviving off of.
Right.
I think that if there's like part of it where, if you love what you do, you won't work a day in your life,
I
is
do
what
see
I've
that.
heard time and time again. And there is some truth to that, but then also, like we've talked about earlier, there is a lot of potential for people being taken advantage of if they
Mhm.
are like highly passionate for a position and will sometimes, do anything it takes to get into an industry or a position because they feel like they need to get their foot in the doors. So what you said there, where you're turning down positions because you want to make sure it's the right fit, a lot of people should take note on that, because that's a very important thing, to know your worth as a grower,
Yeah.
especially in an industry that's going to take advantage of you
Oh,
if
yeah.
the opportunity arises. And so
Yeah.
guarding yourself against that is extremely important.
Oh, absolutely. What I'm noticing, the shift, and it's good for me. This shift that's happening in corporate cannabis is good for me. They're starting to look for leaders and managers and head growers that actually know how to manage teams, right? And so that's been probably my biggest success, is that I had a background previous to this industry where I was managing, sometimes hundreds of thousands of caseloads of people, right? So managing is something that I'm really good at. And so before, though, there's so many loudmouth, men and women, but mostly men, that were like promising the world to people. Been growing for 30 years, like yada yada, classic, and didn't follow through and haven't followed through. Like the last place I was at, I was coming in like the sixth person after 5 men that just didn't want to get on the floor with the plants. And 3 to 4 years later, that's still what CEOs are, you coming to me for, saying like, hey, we're looking for that manager that's wanting to get on the floor with the plants and
Right.
manage the people, right? Like, that's what's wrong with this industry. I know you're an American podcast, but it might be similar. We usually are following right behind the trends there, and the culture in all these facilities is that it's profit over people. And so that's no longer craft, right? As my mentor
Right.
Kevin Jodry would say, it's quality over profit. That's craft cannabis. But that's what you're seeing. And so people, if you go on Indeed and see the reviews for a lot of these places, it's terrible. So
Yeah.
they're taking note of that, and they need to switch that around. So they need more people, and there's lots of leaders like me, and a lot of them are female, that know what to do, have more empathy, I guess, can work with the young people. It's like a very young industry, but it's young people that are in it, right? Like, I'm going to be,
Right.
like I said, 47, but I'm more rare. Like, there's I'm working with 19 to 30-year-olds generally. So it's a different
Definitely.
generation.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's really interesting to see an emerging industry that has this legacy market and groups of legacy growers who, like to use the term master grower or expert gardener, or some of these
Yeah.
terms that kind of are there to almost inflate the ego rather than to provide an explanation of what their capabilities are. And we're seeing that a lot of those people that are trying to maintain standards in this industry, as the price continues to drop, as labor prices continue to go up,
Mhm.
as the overhead cost and the cost per goods, everything is going in the wrong direction for profits to go up, right? And so
Yeah.
to have people who care about the plant, as well as make wanting to be there to make sure that the people that are taking care of the plant are also taken care of, is
Yeah.
extremely important,
Yeah.
because most industries fail if they don't take care of the workforce, especially when there is so much labor required
Yeah.
within agriculture in general, right?
Yeah. It's
And
agriculture.
I
That's right there, what you
it
just
is.
said. Some of these places are 100 acres. How is that not agriculture?
Right, and even in small, like, boutique farms, for farmers market style farms, where they're small enough to keep things. Maybe they do one style of crop, or they only do a small amount per year. That's still fairly craft. And when you
Yeah.
look at cannabis as comparable to the agricultural market in general, then you start to see that these differences in scale do end up prioritizing difference. They prioritize things differently,
Yeah.
where you can be small and you can prioritize the workers, because that means that the workers are going to prioritize the quality of the product, because they feel like they're being taken care of. And there's this reciprocity there, whereas if you're in a very large, 100 acre, or giant greenhouse facility, or some of these massive, multi-hundred light room indoor facilities, and you have these teams of workers that are trying to accomplish all these different tasks, but are constantly being marginalized, because the the overhead keeps going up, like I was saying, the price per pound keeps dropping, and all of a sudden everyone wants a raise each year, right? And so it's really hard to keep up with that. And so sometimes I've seen a lot of places have the policy of, like, either up or out, right? Like, you either need to continue to rise up and provide a better worker for the company, or you should go find work elsewhere, because we need to hire new people that are cheap enough to maintain the amount of bodies that need to be thrown at a task.
Yeah.
Like de-leafing or transplanting, a lot of these things are fairly simple to understand and to get really good at, but you can't have someone doing that who is making a whole lot of money. I mean, you can, but that's where I feel like you have, like, craft farms versus these massive
Yeah.
facilities. There's just a different requirement into labor, and having someone with your understanding of how, humans work, right? Where you're going in there to make sure that they feel heard and understood and cared for. And then also understanding how the plants work. Sometimes you can have that sort of like, it's almost like a parental nature, it feels like, where you have to be like guiding but firm. You still have to make sure that the stuff gets done, right? But you have to make sure that they understand that, listen, I know, like, we're all tired today, but we got to get through this, right? And
Yeah.
then, tomorrow we'll have a more chill day and we can go over some more fun practices and learn some new things.
Yeah,
I,
you're
I,
right. It's a
I do,
balance, and not everybody
yeah,
has the patience, I think, for that kind of balance. Um, and
yeah,
so that's fine. That'll just that'll bump us right up to the top. We'll be floating.
right. Yeah, I mean,
I
it,
mean,
it does remind me a
reputation,
lot of kitchens.
that's the thing that if you have a good reputation for doing certain things, then you're still going to be relevant. So like when I quit, I've been
Absolutely.
off for six months, and so when I left, I was like, oh shit, like I can't be off for too long because I need to stay relevant, coming off of like a big win and stuff. So the last 6 months, I have been doing a lot of back to my roots, home growing. So
Cool.
still like having some genetics that I've had for a long time, and just like really dialing them back in. And like maybe, as you know, you might neglect your plants at home because you're giving all your love and passion to the plants at work. And so I noticed that when I had the time off, my plants outside were just getting ready to pop off. It was August. The best the best outdoor I've ever had was last year. I
Nice.
built a bunch of Hugo bed boxes. I've been doing that since I started, in the city. I was growing in the city of Edmonton when it was legal in the backyard. So just not that long, really, since 2016. But each year, outdoor growing is like fabulous out east compared
That's
to
awesome.
sort of where I was before. So that was awesome. But even the tent growing, right? Like I popped a few new seeds, and I have been trying to grow sacred tobacco for offerings. The last 6 months, my partner in crime, Katrina Jackson, we sort of developed a consulting business. Like we're not incorporated or anything yet, but it's hard to kind of delve into consulting, and I don't feel honestly ready for it either. Like I have more experience to gain, and I'm ready to go get that, a few more years out in the
Sure.
field. But in the meantime, Katrina's got a whole side that complements my cultivation skills and experience. So she's doing product development, and some of the products she's developed for the Canadian market have and are still top selling products, topicals 2.0 products, stuff like that. So we were working in some Indigenous communities out here in New Brunswick, trying to, I guess, get some workforce going on out in those communities. So bringing the youth back onto the reserves by offering them like a cool place to work, like a weed facility, right? So
Cool.
based on the fact that there is some funding money out there for Indigenous communities and things like harm prevention, or like what I just said, bringing the youth back. And so we thought, wouldn't it be a cool idea to help the community build their own production facility so they can manufacture their own sacred products for sovereign ground, or jump into the legal industry, really. Like,
Yeah,
it's two separate ones out here. So,
it's awesome.
yeah, so that would be something that I'd love to keep doing. Unfortunately, it's like relying on government grants and funding, and that's just so not stable. So,
Right. It's fairly sporadic, and when the money does come, it's you almost have to be there at the
yeah,
front of the line, snapping it up as quick as you can.
exactly. We did get lucky enough to sort of collaborate with the doctor, Dr. Shelley Turner, who's like an addiction specialist physician out here in Canada. She's been working with people trying to get, or has successfully gotten people off opiate therapies like Suboxone and things like that. to cannabis treatment, so
Awesome.
cannabinoid therapy. So we're still gonna work on that and try to pursue that, and that's why I'm bringing that up. But at the same time, you know, it's time to get back to work and get a real job and like put that stuff to the side for now.
For sure. Well, I feel like we've had a really nice sort of like catch up to where you are right now in
Yes.
terms of what you're looking to do next and make some moves. But I do like to find out sort of where the passion started and where the interest in plants started. And so, like all the way back, what were some of the first experiences with plants that you had, whether it be cannabis or otherwise? And then, if it was cannabis that was kind of your first interest in plants, then how did that potentially evolve into vegetable gardening or otherwise? Or if it was perhaps some like vegetable gardening with mom and dad or grandma or grandpa, and then if it went from there into cannabis, let's hear the story.
Ooh, yeah, you nailed it. It was my grandpa. So my grandpa, we used to spend like parts of the summer with him, and he had always had this big garden in the backyard, and so we were always, my sister and I were always helping him back there. So just like early on, really had a good connection with plants and just like a basic understanding. My dad was an avid gardener also growing up, and but I was kind of too cool for gardening. Like my dad was always trying to get me into it, but it was just like, fuck, gardening's a lot of work. Like it's weeding, and you know, I wasn't grasping the connection piece or you know anything like that. And so I really just like didn't do anything until I owned my own home in Edmonton. I did the domestic thing for a long time. And so when I owned my own home, I was like, I should have a garden because that's just what people do. Like, so I called it like hate gardening at first because it was hard. It was way harder than I expected it to be. So I actually had to like learn about the vegetables that I was planting and learn about what they shouldn't be next to, and they, you know, just things like that. And once I started learning more about each thing, I really started getting into trees, and I had just had a lot of fruit trees in my backyard for being in a city. So I was learning about pruning, and probably did like 10 years of just sort of practicing in the back, and like every year I'd grow new flowers because flowers are hard to grow. I don't know if anyone's tried to grow like, you know, flowers that you just get in the greenhouse place, just like you grow vegetables. Flowers take longer to germinate. Like, I mean, it depends, but they can be tougher. Um,
Sure.
and so I just looked at weed as another flower. It was just another chemically complicated flower, but it was still a flower. And I hadn't really just decided to grow weed. The reason I started to grow weed was because I started to need it in abundance. I got really sick back in like 2015, 2016, and it ended up being colitis and like just some ulcer stuff. And I lost a lot of weight, and I was going through a lot at the time. I had been sober from drugs and alcohol for 4 years at that time, 3, 4 years, like abstaining from everything. I went to treatment for cocaine and booze, and my buddies were telling me to like, yeah, smoke cannabis, you know, it's gonna help you with your stomach, and I was just like, no, like back then, like even 2016, I mentioned it to my sponsor or whatever, and they were like, whoa, like no way, like
Yeah.
that's crazy. I had a psychiatrist at the time because like I was really well wrapped in treatment and you know maintaining and doing really well because it's hard to stay sober. I'm sure people know addictions everywhere.
Yeah.
But my psychiatrist, who is really helping me along with like, I also have ADD, ADHD. So I was like, you know, enjoying to keep going with her, but she cut me right off when I admitted to using cannabis to treat my stomach problems. But
Really.
the thing is that the gastro people were trying to give me like um, chemo meds and things like that, and things that I was more scared of getting addicted to, I
Sure.
guess. And like they just make you really dopey and out of it. So I was still just abstaining, and then I believe it was Christmas time, or I know it was Christmas time. And I was just desperate. And my buddy was like, here, smoke this. Like, enough's enough. So I did. And it changed my life forever. That night, even, I felt a little bit of hunger, like appetite. Like, to not have an appetite and be chronically nauseous for a year is, I was suicidal. Like, it was terrible. It was
That sounds
terrible.
awful.
So that was the start of when I started to heal my body. So I went into the system to try and get a legal prescription. And that was really hard to navigate as somebody who wasn't legacy or didn't know anything. Like, I had a drug dealer, of course, but it was like a nice guy that I trusted in the social work biz. You know, I did it on the side.
Sure.
I didn't know any like black market people. So I did eventually get my 2 grams a day or something like that. And I remember taking almost a year to convince this frickin' doctor to let me grow my own because it was costing so much money. And it was like, yeah, 2016, 2017 at the time. So it was pre-legalization here in Canada. But there's still a long medical history here since the 90s. And so I was just trying to navigate sort of the end of that. And it was
Sure.
difficult. At the time, I didn't know that the cannabis clinic that I was attached to, that I was referred to from my doctor, was actually owned by Aurora. Like, as a consumer, you don't know that these clinics are owned by these big, huge corporations. And so then they're pushing you in that way to, you can only buy these products. So at the time, you have to get a prescription for one licensed producer, so you'd kind of go through the rules of that. So eventually I navigated that system for about a year, and it was so expensive, like $700 a month just to get what I needed. And at the time I was infusing. So fun fact is I started educating the community on YouTube in maybe 2017, 18. I'd have to look back. It's a long time. They're embarrassing, so I barely go there. But infusing, that was my thing. Trial and error. Back in 2016, which is only 8 and a bit years ago, you couldn't get any information from anybody's grandma or anybody about how to get weed butter. You had to figure it out yourself or know somebody that knew what they were doing. So I did the whole butter with water with like, I went through so many gross things that I made my friends eat because it would get you high, but it tasted really bad or didn't get you high. Like, so that was sort of my jam then. And so I was going through a lot of weed, infusing. I started like delving into the unregulated market a little bit, selling my edibles and my infusions because I did eventually get really good at it. And kind of delved into CBD because at the time my dog had been diagnosed with epilepsy, a really severe type of epilepsy, cluster seizures. And someone had recommended CBD. CBD was so expensive. Plus, you didn't even know what you were buying back then, unregulated. And so I decided to grow it. So the very first CBD that I ever grew was called Candida. It was popular at the time. It's a very good CBD. The highest CBD on it was something like 90%, and it was considered a hemp variety because the THC was under 0.3%.
Nice.
I actually won an award with that Candida. It was the highest CBD in the home grower competition that I was enrolled in at the time through Hemp Fest. But CBD is something that I still continue to keep. I'm doing a Deadlights now, which is subcool. It's a really awesome strain of CBD as well. It's the closest thing I've found since I had the Candida that I lost a long time ago. But yeah, just I guess just really getting into popping off is the word I use for educating. So whether that was teaching people how to infuse, I just really wanted to give back, I guess. I wanted to help what I found hard to find for myself. So, and some of those videos got, some pretty good traction at first. I couldn't monetize on anything now because it's like 10K. That's nothing now. But also because I was smoking weed, so they're all age restricted and it's just old news. The old days, right?
Yep. I mean, we still will even put like that our content that we make isn't made for kids because
Yeah, it's
there's so
probably
many
good.
different laws and depending on if it's Canada where you have to be 18 or
Yeah.
the US where you have to be 21 and there's you know there's still a huge stigma, so we just try to protect ourselves as best we can.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
yeah, you brought up a lot of memories with making cannabis
Content.
butter and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Me and my partner would always make it using a crock pot,
Oh yeah.
water and butter and
Yeah.
all the extra trim or we use like a vaporizer, so like all
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah. I've done that
pre-vaped
too.
weed just
Every
goes right
weight.
into it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh gosh, like I have not found
Smells like
one way that
crazy.
someone's mentioned that I haven't tried to either decarb or infuse. Like I've done milk, I've done honey, I've done like keef. Like I can put keef in anything. Like, and it's
Yep.
good. It's good recipes because it wasn't anything that I was told by Magic Butter Machine or anything like that. Just using them as an example, they're a great machine, but by trial and error. So just knowing and feeling what works best for me,
Yep.
really. Like I still have unregulated clients that want my CBD oil and my gummies because they are most effective for them, just based
Right.
on probably the way I infuse it. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, we make fudge with the butter because you can
Mm.
just stick fudge in the fridge and it lasts forever.
Yeah,
And
that's a good idea.
like we're having like little tiny pieces, like quarter quarter of an inch.
Yeah,
They're just so small and because it's so potent, but you can't really find that on the market. Everywhere has like
no.
regulations on the THC, like the grams of THC or the milligrams of THC that can be in the edible, and it's
Yeah,
like, well, you're making me eat a whole bunch more sugar than I want to get the same
yeah. And
results.
because of my colitis, I have a sugar cap. Like literally, it'll send me into a puking fit if I go above, say, like 18 grams in one serving, which is not hard to hit because a pop has like
No.
50. I could never have a pop or I'd start vomiting. So
Ugh.
those edibles are not for me. Like I couldn't even have them. The other thing I don't
Yeah.
like is a lot of regulated and unregulated edibles on the market are distillate. So I'm not a super big fan of distillate. It gives me a headache. I like a full flower effect.
Yeah.
So it's harder to find. So my stuff is always just like it's the guts, it's everything, you know?
For sure. And also, I like will always make the butter now with stuff that's like been sitting for a year or two. So it's always, fully oxidized,
Yeah.
like extremely old cannabinoids that have mostly converted into whatever their final form is going to be already. So
Yeah.
I'll decarb it maybe a little bit, but
Yeah.
sometimes I just will let the crock pot go for like 24 hours and I'm like, yeah, that's enough heat to decarb it all the way.
Yeah, for sure. That's the kind of that's how I make my death brownies.
Yes. I mean,
Where
that's why
people faint.
such a small amount.
Yeah, it's not what I want, but it's
No,
happened before. Because yeah, that exactly the old stuff that's it's been
gets
sitting
potent.
there. You don't even really need to decarb it because it's already oxidized and degraded into CBN, and then yeah, it just hits you so good.
Yep. A funny
Right.
story, like maybe like 10 or 15 years ago, I had done just that, used a bunch of old weed and made butter, and then I made rainbow rice crispy treats with it.
Mm,
And I cut the squares into what I would think people would want to eat for a Rice Krispie treat, not thinking about how much
right.
THC and cannabinoids were going to be in there. And I gave my dad one, and he ate it and got so high that he like passed out on the couch and then crawled to the bathroom because he had to throw up. It was just so intense of a high. And ever since then, I've been like extremely careful with my portioning because I think that was when I was like, 17 or
Yeah,
18 and
you
I
live, you
was just
learn.
like, "No, you can take it, man. Just eat the whole thing. You'll be fine. I had one earlier. I feel great."
Yeah, I know, I know. I've death sentenced my friends by accident before.
Yep. Oh, that's funny though. So with some of your earlier grows when you were just doing the home grow thing, what were some of the methods that you used? What sort of style of growing were you doing?
Um, I like like to dabble a lot. My main style would be cocoa coir and sort of any of those pre-made bottles. So I've used Advanced Nutrients. That's what I started with. There was Emerald Harvest, just like all the fancy stuff. And then I started buying just like general hydroponic because I wanted to learn. Like at the time, I was a big fan and still am. I don't follow much, but Dr. Coco. So
Right.
I learned like by watching his tutorials. Like even if you go back into some of my old tutorials, they're like, I love Dr. Coco. Like how embarrassing, like shout out. I ended up on a podcast with all those guys, which is like something cool that, I used to be on Growing with My Fellow Growers. I was
Yeah.
with the guys at the beginning for a year. I was with Shane and the guys. So,
That's where I think I first encountered you.
okay,
Was with the
cool.
Growing with My Fellow Growers podcast because that was one of the,
Those are
it
my
was one of the
OGs
Yeah, and it was one of those
and
podcasts
lives.
that I feel like my podcast also kind of falls within the same category of trying to be educational, where
Yeah,
we're trying to like not only allow people to tell stories, but to get information out there that they feel would benefit the community
yeah,
of both growers and consumers alike, right?
yeah.
And they were definitely some of the earlier shows that you could listen to and really pick up a lot of great information that you could then apply to your own either home growing situation,
Yeah.
or if you were taking notes of all these different things that you were learning, and you could cross reference it based on this panel of people that were providing their insight into like specific topics. I think one of the first ones I ever listened to was their indoor versus outdoor grow talk, which to me was just such great information to help
Mm-hmm.
teach any new grower about like light cycles and substrate needs and requirements and electrical needs and requirements. And if you are trying to remain on the cheap home grow side of things,
Yeah.
then how you can accomplish that without needing to invest all this money into tents and lights and nutrients and all the expensive gizmos and gadgets, right? Like
Yeah.
it was refreshing to hear that, because so many
That's
other
my
places
jam
were like,
too.
you have
Yeah.
to buy a air conditioner and you need to
Yeah.
seal your room
Got
and
to
get
learn how to ghetto do
CO2
it.
and
Yeah. With duct
yeah,
tape and shit. Yeah. And
yeah,
zip
exactly.
ties. Yeah. To this day. Like giant zip ties to hold up my fans in there. Like things are ghettoed up to make it as cheap as possible. But I learned so much from those guys, and I continue to learn from those guys. Like they are some of the top OGs. Like still fucking committed, and every single week. Like
Yeah,
holy, no matter what's going on in their lives, like especially shout out to like Jack and Russ and like the ones that are there like every single week. Like wow, good
they've
job.
both done an episode with me, and I've also sung their praise because
Yeah, they've taught a
they
lot
have
of
done a
people how
lot
to
for the
grow.
community. Yep.
I wish I
And
could
then
do that
like
for a living and make money. Like that's the dream, right? Like that's what I came out hopping to do. Was like I have posts on LinkedIn that are like, fuck government weed, like let's home grow together and I'll teach you how, right? But nobody wants to
yep,
pay me, so it's like I gotta go back into the old money bags. But it's
yep,
what the dream would be, right? The passion is aligned with the home grower. That is the heart of cannabis. I will always
right.
say that. So it's such a battle for me ethically to work at scale and export and live behind these regulations and stand behind these companies and know that that's not the heart of cannabis.
Right. Because the companies aren't smoking the weed,
None of
right?
them. Nope. None of them. Even the
Somebody at
ones
their
that tell
home is
you they
smoking
are,
it.
they're
Yep.
not smoking weed. You go, you get that guy in a room and you smoke him under the table. That's what you do.
Yep.
They'll never let you
I'll
catch you doing that. They're drinking alcohol and snorting cocaine. It's very similar all over, I'm sure.
yep. I'm lucky to be in a position with the company that I'm at where we are I'm proud to consume the cannabis that we produce, because it's small. It's a little 4-room facility, 12 lights
Nice.
per room, couple of large veg spaces, because we also do 2 acres of outdoor where we take a lot of good care on our outdoor plants, and use non-toxic and regulated regulation approved sprays
Yeah.
for pest and pathogen prevention, and then we turn it all into fresh frozen. It all gets processed so it's nice and clean, and it's some of the like the better
Yeah,
dabs and
that I'm down
stuff on the
with.
market,
That
and
I
I
would
love
like
it.
to do that actually. That's like you're leading me into the outdoor. I have interviewed for a couple places that basically grow biomass in a good way
Yeah,
for inputs or to make yeah, inputs.
yeah, and we use a lot of general agricultural practices because we do row cropping basically, and
Yeah.
it's very satisfying to be able to accomplish so much with such a small team, because sometimes I feel like the outdoor places, they think, oh, I need to just get a bunch of labor to throw at this because I'm going to dry it all and trim it all up and sell this flower, and I'm that's just not necessarily the move for outdoor cannabis right now.
Hmm.
I feel like concentrates and
Yeah.
extracts are the
Yeah.
way to go.
I agree. Same with out here
You get
too.
it.
There's outdoor greenhouse, there's the green belt going on in Ontario. There's some really good climates to grow. Even here in New Brunswick, like I said, if I had the money to get something started on this land, there's 60 acres here, I could grow. But
It's tough.
it's tough.
So with your so it sounds like you've mostly done salt-based
Yeah, back
growing.
to that.
No,
I've
it's
done
totally fine.
simply like solely organic basically the last like 3.5 years, so indoor and outdoor. Always outdoor has been organic. I've always been interested in learning about soil. I mean, I hang around with the guys that have taught me how to build my own soil. Like I've always been interested in it, but I never understood it. Like as a salt grower, I was always trying to control everything and add everything up by math, and so I'd be like, like I just didn't understand how the plant was just picking up the nutrients when it wanted, like or when
Right.
it needed. You just had to keep the plant happy in the root zone, and how simple it is to do organic. And so I just really started diving into that more indoor as I was able to at the facility that I was at, plus doing it at home on a smaller scale in my tent. So seeing the variation too, some of the same genetics even between salt indoor facility grown with like some of the best equipment, and then also just in my tent, right? You can see like different
Sure.
variations. But so organic is new. It's where I align now as far as the best quality cannabis is organic living soil grown cannabis, in my opinion, based on doing my own experimenting with the same genetics in organics, in salts, using different fertilizers, even organic synthetic fertilizers. Okay, so there's those too. The best quality, in my opinion, is always going to be the living soil, and even more so like the huiculture stuff that I grow outside. As long as it's a genetic that's for outside because it's been bred outside, so something from California or even the East Coast over here, that is going to be the best cannabis.
For sure. I've heard a lot of people sort
Yeah.
of say the same thing.
Yeah.
And but I always like to ask though, when was the last time that you took the same care for a small number of plants and grew them with salts at home? Because it sounds like you've been doing organics for
Oh
like
yeah.
3 years now.
I was gonna just say, well, right now. So I switched
Oh,
back to salts at the end of this outdoor season. I decided I was unpracticed, and so I wanted to get back into it. So it's harder to find the inputs that I need just living rurally where I live, and so that's kind of been that I'll just do,
hmm,
make my own shit here because I can get it here. But
sure.
so I've always used can of cocoa, so I just stuck with my can of cocoa, and then I'm using like a local fertilizer company called Rise Nutrients, and it's working really good. But um, just like what I'm trying to say is that these Part A and Part B nutrient companies, like I'm using Rise Nutrients right now, and it's working really well. Previous to that, I was using Remo Nutrients, and they work really well with the same can of cocoa. I don't necessarily see different results. I find them to be all very similar, and I like ease of use. So
Right.
that's going to always usually be my go-to. I like Rise because it's local and I can get it here. Remo, I can also get here, but there's a chance the shipment could not make it. I could drive to the Rise guy's house, probably be like, hook me up.
Yeah,
Um, so I'm
that's
always
pretty
going to kind
cool.
of want to choose local.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I've been a huge fan of JR Crop Tech
Okay.
for salt-based nutrients, but I don't believe that they're available in Canada yet, or they
Haven't
might
heard
have
of
just
them.
recently. But they have like one bag for flour, one bag for veg, and you
Yeah,
can,
love it.
either use the salts directly into your reservoir and mix them up, or you can make a stock solution and
Yep.
dose them in. And they they don't sell their own calcium nitrate, which is really nice because brand name calcium nitrate, when it's under a hydroponic nutrients label, is always more expensive, but you can get really high grade calcium nitrate for extremely cheap. So they like promote that you do that, which is really nice because it really reduces the overall cost per gallon
Hmm.
mixed, even at high strengths. Like at the facility that I help manage right now, we're running between 4.0 and 4.5 EC input, which is, it's really high, and a lot of
It's really
people get
high.
like,
Yeah.
whoa, that's crazy. And it's like, well, yeah, but we
I
have,
worked at a place that went
really
that
high
high,
ppfd,
higher.
CO2. Yeah, sorry.
I worked at a place that also ran really high like that, or like where it doesn't read, it's like 5+ or something like that.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, we try to keep it within there, and then by using substrate monitoring, we can detect that,
Yep.
the poor water EC is staying right around there, which is really ideal for like a bulking phase, and then you can raise it up really quickly for like a ripening phase or a stretching phase. You can get those generative and vegetative cues, and you can kind of turn on a dime a lot quicker with that high EC
Yeah.
because it's easier to reduce and increase based on
Okay.
your substrate management. But I've seen people also crash and burn really quickly when they don't have the correct monitoring, like the different like substrate meters and whatnot, to be able to tell when their plants are getting out of a safe range.
Yeah, that's what worries me right away in big facilities is just like they don't prepare as well for the dry out, I guess, like especially in Rockwell, and then you're using high EC like that. Ah,
Yeah, I always suggest cocoa because rock will. Yeah, if you get too
yeah.
dry, then you're never gonna really recover from that.
I've seen some things in some big facilities out west or whatever. I worked in a 500,000 foot facility, so just pods upon pods upon pods, just weed, fields of weed inside, and walking into a room where the staff the day before forgot to like switch the irrigation to on after a transplant or whatever, and like the whole one side of the crop is just like laying on the ground basically. But I've also seen it where they quickly like burst the juice in and come back in 2 hours and they're okay, but they're like
Yeah,
it's like amazing how resilient these plants are when you think a plant's dead. Watching some of those like what not to do's has been like very beneficial and helpful for me to like be like, okay, so that's the extreme of that.
definitely. Yeah, I feel like you learn a lot from the different failures that you witness, and
Yeah.
sometimes the successes go under the radar because things are just working as they should, so you didn't necessarily catch that one thing you did really helped set it off right.
Yeah.
So, throughout your growing experience, both indoors with your home grow, outdoors with your home grow, at the different facilities that you've helped run, manage, and work at, what were some of the successes that you found in your growing experiences there that helped you learn something? And then on the flip side of that coin, what are some of the failures that you witnessed that helped you learn
Mm,
something, kind of within the same vein of thought that we were just talking about?
okay. So, um, probably one of the most like kept me up at night, but was the most exciting and best learning experience was at the last facility I was at. I came there to basically develop the cultivation department. And so first thing we started with was a pheno hunt. And the reason I came out here part of it was that genetic library that he had. And so most of the genetics, and I'm just choosing not to say the names of places that I work, but
Fine.
so the genetics, people can figure it out. The genetics that we're at, there are 20,000 seeds, 500 different strains, and literal cuts too that were shipped over here, like somehow, some way, all from Kevin Jodrey, California, like huge genetic seed banks, like just stuff that I was like, holy fuck, like this guy doesn't even know what he has, you know? He probably does because he got most of them. He went on a big thing. Anyways, so that was like 300, over 300 seeds. It was a small pheno hunt when you talk about like what people do out, you know, at scale or whatever, but like, you know, 30 seeds each, 14 different strains, all researched by me and my team, picked out of 500, which is really hard when you have like, it's an overwhelming amount of like research and okay guys, like we're just at the table, like what's on this one, what's on this one, like you got to figure out what your CEO wants, right? So it's like not what I want but what he wants. So he gives me this, like, I want fruits, give me all the fruits, right? So that's the first hunt. So we're getting apples, we're getting bananas, we're getting grapes, but you want, there's all these different strains of all those different fruits. So it was, you know, trying to narrow it down. And so just from the very day one, I was never, that was my first big task where I was responsible for that much genetic material. Like it kept me up at night. Like, what if these seeds don't pop? Like I've always been really good at it, you know, but I've never been able to do this because facilities out here aren't popping seeds. Like you're just going in, you're working, you're doing your 9 to 5
Right.
and you're out, right? Like, so it was like unbelievably that he was trusting me with this, but we did it. We had a 98% success rate, so that was exhilarating. Exhilarating, because these seeds were all different ages. Like I didn't know, some of them we didn't even have history on. They were just like
Sure.
Kevin J's bank, you know, like cool. So yeah, that whole process, from eliminating, like, so we it was over 300 seeds that survived, all these little seedlings. I still have pictures. It was the coolest thing to go in every day and be like, you know, they're all still alive. And then, you know, getting them past that first transplant, and then you start sending them in for DNA, right? That whole process is so cool. So that was very successful. That whole year, just amazing. And ended up getting really like 20 solid genetics to add to his library, and only they've used one really, and that was the top one just for what was trending at that time, and that was the grape, because
Right.
I picked that because all through the grow it was the only one that smelled like real grape, so I knew it wasn't terpenes and I knew it was different. And then when it dried, it smelled like grape candy. And then when you smoked
Yeah.
it, you got so high. It was high THC. So it was like it was easy to grow, low leaf. Like it was just obviously a good choice. And so
Sure.
that was probably my biggest success. So that won awards. There was the very first Legal Cannabis Cup. It won third. So for me, that's a success. I don't need to win first every time. And
For
then
sure.
also in New Brunswick, it was runner-up for top sativa, I think last year or the year before, where they do a cannabis cup out here. And so that was really cool, just that genetic. Like a first-time gal, just, you know, no 30
Yeah.
years of genetic hunting or growing here, but, you know, having obviously Kevin at the time to help out here and there. He's a busy guy, so whenever I really, truly needed it. But that was probably the biggest success. So the biggest failure.
Before you get into the
Okay.
biggest failure, I I love the conversation of phenohunting because I feel like it's
Okay,
one of
it's my
those things
favorite.
that are, it's like one of the last real sort of like passionate things that people can get into with cannabis is like breeding
Yes.
and phenohunting,
Yeah.
because you can
Yeah.
have such unique tastes that are very subjective to yourself. And if you're kind of following that, you know, call it passion or call it whatever you want, of I like this, so I'm going to follow it to try and find the best iteration that I like.
Mm-hmm.
So many times you can find something that is just exceptional, but a lot of people will do pheno hunting in different ways. And
Yep.
so I was curious, what were some of the practices during your pheno hunt that you took that other people might be able to learn from?
For sure. I love talking about Phenohunting, and I don't pretend to be a master or an expert at it. Most of my experience literally comes from my own home growing, outdoor, indoor, and then that experience as well, and just all the different genetics that I've grown in the last 6 years to scale, right? So there's something to that. But basically, the thing that is the most simple that made me understand it the most, especially when you're doing it for someone else, right? So you kind of have to be good at it, and like, yeah, I'm going to use my intuition and what I like as a daily smoker, right? That's in this, like, I am a consumer too, but
Right.
I'm an elite, different, like, small, make no, like, I don't buy weed from. I'm not the consumer that they're after. So you have to, like, figure out what your project is first. So this advice comes from Kevin. So who is like a world-renowned breeder, teacher, pheno hunter, mentor. He says that simple as, like, you pheno hunt based on whatever your goal is. So you make a goal. So whether that's your goal, so that's going to be for, I'm going to be pheno hunting for a medical strain for effect. Or I'm going to be pheno hunting because I want it to look visually great. Or I'm going to be pheno hunting because I want it to be 30% THC. I'm pheno hunting because I want all those things, and I want it to smell like a fruit. My boss.
Right.
So, yeah, so it almost became easier at that time. I figured out my own rating charts just based on the directive that I was getting from different mentors. So, like, all my mentors, I was, like, asking and pulling information. The guys I was just speaking of, they let me stay in the group chat. So even though I'm not on there every week with them, I can still read and learn what they're popping in there, or I've gone in there with questions, stuff like that. So based on all that knowledge and just, like, my own research, I created rating sheets, which I find is really helpful to write things down. As home growers, we don't do it enough, I think, or people just maybe don't think of it as important as it is. And for me, I always started with, like, journaling and writing it all down because I was working on a forum, so I was posting this stuff, and then eventually it turned into notebooks that were just, like, records of what I did. So basically keeping records, however that looks, for me it was a checklist. Like, who doesn't love a checkboard where you're checklisted
Right.
and
It's very
walking in looking
satisfying.
authoritative to the plants, like, hello, yeah, I'm the boss, like, I got the clipboard today. But, like, based on what you're looking for, right? So visually, you're looking through them all the way from seedling development to flower, which is the most important, obviously, but you're looking for vigor. So in veg, you're looking for vigor. That's the main thing that you're looking for, and you can see that by how fast the plant's growing, how dry it's getting more quickly, how much more you have to up pot it. Like, that's vigor. When a plant's just like, let's get going, like, I'm gonna grow into a tree. That's a good plant right there. So, but you don't know if you have a male or female, maybe. So it depends on what your project is again, right? So maybe you are looking for a male because people are pheno hunting males. I've done that here. I have Royal Kush pollen because I did a male pheno hunt. So probably the biggest thing for people that they can take home and use is record keeping, and then following that along and not doing too much. So you want to keep your plants as healthy as possible. You don't want to be survivor hunting, not in the first run. You want to be looking for fabulous, and you can't look for fabulous when they're on death's door.
Right.
Or if you're
And you,
like, oh yeah, I'm going to starve these things. Like, no, not on the first run, not on the first run.
right. I
So
always tell people they need to create a baseline that they need to follow in all of their practices when pheno hunting, and they can't baby any of the plants. They can't treat any of them special. They
no,
have to just perform on their own, and you have to choose them from that
and
performance
document it. Yep.
and document it. And then, one thing that I always like to ask, because I have my own very specific practices for this, but What do you like to flower out in a pheno hunt? Do you like to flower out the seed plant, like the plant that was produced from the seedling, or do you like to clone it and flower out the clone?
Both. So again, for me, it would depend on what I'm looking for. If you're wanting something that is going to perform well in a facility, then you can clone and see how it's going to go, and then just keep repeating it, basically. But I'd say if you're looking for a unicorn and you're able to really follow that seed right through to flower, that's your mother, like your first mother.
Sure. So are you, when you do that, when you flower out a seed plant, are you usually taking cuttings and saving the cuttings as
Yeah.
your mothers? Yep.
Yeah, so that's the first mother that you're flowering out, I guess, and then her babies are waiting in lieu to either be culled or move on to the next flower. So you're getting to see, I guess, it's valuable. So what I'm saying is it's valuable to see that seed product turn into a flower. In my experience, that seed plant is a stronger, that's the most vigorous the plant will be. That's just how I've seen it. It just, like, the
For
stalks
sure.
are huge, like it's just like it's an amazing thing to see. So I think if anyone can do it, most facilities can't because it's a schedule. You have 4 or 5 rooms, then one of them is probably for moms and veg, and so you're on a tight schedule, and so a lot of times you're not gonna be able to see any of those
Right.
seed plants become the flower goddesses that they deserve to be.
For sure. I it's for that exact reason that I always suggest people flower out clones, because sometimes when you have a seed plant, right, and you grow it out and it's super
It's
healthy,
magnificent.
super vigorous, and you flower it out and you get this awesome expression and structure, and you saved a clone of it, and then you go back and you flower that clone out, you might be disappointed.
Yeah.
Sometimes the vigor changes, sometimes the flower morphology especially will change, and I've noticed sometimes that the terpene profile will change from a seed plant to a mother, and it could just be due to, whether it be the taproot or the overall root
Yeah.
structure
I
and
always
vigor
wonder
of the
about the
plant.
taproot. Yeah.
Yeah, but I see the value in it, especially for home growers, because it might be the best iteration. And if they just are going to be popping seeds every run,
Mm-hmm.
then why not?
Yeah.
But definitely in like a commercial setting, it almost makes more sense
Yeah.
to flower out the clone,
Yeah,
because
you want to make sure it
that's what
can
your
act right.
right. That's what your successive crops are going to be. How they are going to be best represented is from the clones.
Yeah. If your goal is a factory setting, and sometimes even a small place is like, everything is a certain way, that's still sort of mini factory setting. I don't know what else to call it, but you got to make sure that
Sure.
they're going to perform like their sisters. Like, it's
Right.
all going to be very homogenized.
Definitely. And it's almost like for people that are growing for medicine too, it's one of the reasons why I never suggest autoflowers for people that are growing specifically for medicine. Because if they find an autoflower that produces this
Mm.
awesome cannabinoid and terpene profile, and they say, oh, this is the best medicine I've had, well, here's some tough news, my
I know.
friend. It's
I've
going to be
experienced it.
extremely hard to find that again,
Yeah,
because you can't clone the autoflower. And
not nicely.
unless you're working with a really refined company like Mephisto Genetics or something, you're not going to be able to necessarily find the same phenotype within that same pack of seeds, or even in 10 different packs of the same seeds.
Yeah.
And so that's where I always am telling people, like, run your clone, because if that's the unicorn for you, then you know that you have it and that you can reproduce it.
Yeah, it's a faster way to get to that goal too. Like, that's what I'm
Right.
hearing from you. And that's why they do it like that in regulated cannabis or in facilities, is because exactly, you want to make sure that it's going to perform. And if you're using your like, I have the same weed, I have some new stuff, but I have the same stuff that I know works for me for the last few years in there. Just keep doing its thing for, you know, and the point of getting at is the uniformity is what you want, like the consistent medicine, exactly what you're saying. So even as a home grower, if you're medically minded, you might want, you know, this is my strain for daytime and this is my strain for nighttime. And these are the two I like to mix together. And this is the one I make for oil. So,
Right. Yes, absolutely. And yeah, there's so many different avenues that we could go into in terms of maintaining that genetic
oh my
stock, right?
gosh.
Where
Yeah.
people need to keep the mothers healthy, keep them happy.
Yeah.
They need to, you know, if they are keeping moms around for a long time, they need to know the risks that they're
Hmm.
possibly going to have to face through that, through, you know, different pressures building up within the plants, whether it be viral
Yeah.
or fungal or pathogenic pests, you know, all these different things that keeping a plant around for a long time, which was a very common practice in the traditional market days of I need to keep this mom around because she's the one that produces the clones that I like to run,
Right.
versus successively cloning them at a regular interval to make sure that you have fresh, vigorous genetic material to make your production clones from. And, you know, this is super relevant for home growers who are growing for medicine, as well as then, you know, anybody that's wanting to take those practices, like you took your practices, like I took my practices, and translate that into a commercial space.
Hmm.
Learning some of these things is extremely crucial. And
Yeah.
I've seen some definite, like, missteps where people will try to enter into the commercial space and take their, you know, I baby this one or two plants and make them my everything for this 3 or 4 months that I'm growing them, and then go into a facility and get really disappointed by the fact that they can't baby every single plant because they're responsible for hundreds.
I know. It's a real shock as a person that's
It
been
is.
there.
It was a huge shock for me as well. I just
I do my
even the
best.
first yeah, even the first facility I worked at, everything was hand watered,
Oh,
and
yeah.
uh, and I was like, oh, this is nice. You get to spend time with each plant, and then I look back and I'm like, how did we even afford that sort of labor for the amount of
Oh my
product we were
God,
producing? It's
dude.
ridiculous.
Irrigation has been the one thing that's trended in all my positions. Like, I was an irrigation lead. Actually, at this one spot, who I was hired on to help get the automation going. It was a vertical grow. Um, and we were hand watering. Okay, so I'm trying to remember how many plants are in there. 3 tiers, dude. 3 tiers.
My
So
God.
we were using a Zoom boom to water the plants with buckets and ladders. And there was one time where I was in the mother room, and I swear to God, I wish I had this footage. But I was on this rickety old ladder with my 5-gallon bucket, dragging it up to the second
Oh, they didn't
level.
even have a hose and a pump.
Not that, no, no, because of the weird concoctions of things that were going on. I won't even get into that. But up on a big ladder with my lab beaker, plastic beaker, like
Yeah,
watering these 3-gallon pro
put
mixtures.
375 milliliters in each one 5 times.
Yes. Yes, no human error, I'm sure, right? And then you gotta
Nope.
go log it all. But anyways, that's not even my story. I fell off the ladder.
Oh
Everything
my
went down, and I
God.
was like hanging from the second tier.
Oh,
We hand watered like 900 plant rooms, like 3 tier, 900 plant rooms like that for 6 months every day. And I wonder,
that's brutal.
how did I do that? Yeah. Yeah, that was crazy. It just made me think of it. I must have blocked it out. But it's like a fun experience when I think of actually like setting up the automation. We were using Netaflex, and it was my first time. It was during COVID. And so they got the Netaflex machine into the facility, but because of COVID, they couldn't send out. It was because it's from Texas, so there was nobody coming over from America at that time, so they couldn't bring out any techs to like train the staff on it, and that had all sort of happened before I got hired. So we got hired, and they're like, "Here's this kid, he'll teach you stuff, and then set this up," you know. So there was lots of experiences where you send the water out and it goes up, and you're like, oh my God, I hope that went into the right room. And then you're running down the hallway to the facility, and people are yelling because it's like, oh my God, the in their storage. Like, it was like so many crazy irrigation experiences.
That's crazy.
Floods, like 500, like how these were 2,000 gallon tanks for RO, and how is it not automated to shut off when it hits the top, like you'd
It
remember
like didn't have
2
a float
hours
valve.
later and go back and be like, fuck, and the whole place would be like so flooded.
That's
The
crazy.
boys did that with acid once, like for um, phosphorus acid. It like exploded out of the Netaflex machine, and the whole place was flooded with acid. Like 8 months later, still cleaning up like pieces from the ground that were like,
Shoot away.
yeah, crazy shit,
Yeah,
man, crazy.
that's crazy. The Netaflex is the like the fertigation skid, right? Where it has a few different input channels that you can put the different like acid or the
Yeah.
your different NPKs and whatnot into it and then send it out. We use one of those for our field irrigation.
Okay.
And the craziest part to me is that the software that the thing runs off of is from like the late 90s.
Oh my god, it's
And
similar then.
yeah, I
I was
bet
gonna
you
say
it's
it
the
looks like an
exact
old
same.
computer when you're on there.
It's like the yep, and you have to like the screen is like that green
Yeah.
with like the black block
I
letters.
I
Yep,
probably have pictures on here. If I can find some, I'll send them to you.
yep. I use the same machine every summer, and it works great when it's correctly functioning.
Yeah, like
But it took us a while. Like
that.
my boss had, a manual this thick that he
Yeah.
read through to make sure that he understood it, and then only taught me the things that I needed to know,
Yeah.
and like distilled it down to okay, these are the only functions you ever have to mess with because there's so much
Yeah,
back
it was
end
overwhelming. But you're right.
software in
Once
there
you
that
get the little piece in there that you need,
yep.
easy.
And I remember it for the summer, and then like right now, because we're gonna get ramping back up to get our crop going for the summer. I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, oh, I don't. I would have to go and stand in front of the machine again for an
It's so
hour or two
tedious. I
just to
know, like
remind
going back and
myself.
forth. Oh yeah, the memories came right back to me for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I always
But
wondered that.
that's
Like,
like
why does this machine seem so old, but it's like new technology? So strange.
it is really strange, and it's because it's been used for so long in greenhouse irrigation and applications, where and the thing with it is you need electricity to run it, and
Mm.
that's why I always suggest people if they are setting up like a commercial facility or even like an advanced home grow where they have a few lights in a room built out that they could just go with something simple like a dosatron where it's all hydraulic and it
Yeah.
all just doses your system through the water pressure itself. So you can just, if you have clean water on your main,
Yeah.
then you can run it from your main, and you won't ever lose water pressure unless the entire like district you live in loses water pressure. And if that happens, you have a whole bunch more stuff to worry about than your grow.
Yeah. There's been some
But
crazy learning curves out here for weather shit, like hurricanes throwing shit down. So,
for sure, or freezes as well, I'm sure, because you
yeah.
probably have to keep your lines, like your fill lines. If anything's running outdoors, you got to keep them wrapped in some sort of heating cord, or
Yeah.
have a. We've had some like crazy ice storms out here in Oregon where we had to set up like a drip setting in our different irrigation systems where we would have it burst little amounts of water through the system every couple minutes,
So it won't
but
freeze.
very small amounts. Yeah, and just stuff like that you start to learn the how the facility operates based on all these other things, and you
Yeah.
start to become that like universal key where I can fix that really quick, or I know how to do this. But it does come with time and with a lot of failures, right? Because you don't know that your lines are going to freeze until one of them explodes on you.
Totally. Yeah.
So, we kind of got a little bit off track there, but
Yeah.
I think it was great, with the pheno hunting and irrigation stuff. That's a lot of stuff that people should know is it takes a lot to figure out and to
Yeah,
do
it's
correctly.
experience based for sure. I'm
It
not a
is.
learning by the book. Like that manual did nothing for me. It was
No.
scary because I didn't have someone visually showing me how to do it. So
Right.
it's a different learning.
Well, with that being, we were at where your successes were, and then we were going to go into what one of your setbacks were that you learned a lot from. So go ahead and share that story.
Yeah, so probably my first big setback or where I was disappointed was also in the first year of the place when I came out here. It was the first spot where I was like fully in charge, and so any crop failures would be me facing the consequences. And so we had some challenging input issues, and like I had alluded to earlier, it was a big shock to come from Western Canada to Eastern Canada, East Coast specifically, where the biggest city from me is an hour and a half away, and it's not even that big of a city compared to what I'm used to. And just not being able to get the things that I need, especially at a scale size. So, was working with different soil companies because it was a living soil. It was aquaponics as well. And so trying to find a living soil that's also going to be complemented by our fish poop.
Right.
And so the first or second, I can't remember if it was the first or second flower grow where it was like monocrop. It was dosi cake we were growing. And the soil that we were using ended up being like the batch that they had made was extra hot, so the plants were just getting fried. They were getting ammonia burned, and like so it was like hard to watch. I called it Brown Town because it was like a section of the crop that was just turning brown, and we had to get rid of some of those plants early. It didn't all die, but it wasn't a good crop, and compared to what I'm used to growing or what we had grown, right? So that was a big learning curve, and you just got to take your dumps with your successes, right? Like it's not all going to be roses and sunshine, and sometimes it is going to be disappointing, and at that point we were just trying to do our best to like get the crop to the finish line. And the other thing, because from that crop we didn't use most of it, honestly, most of it went to garbage, but that the other big fail that I could think of was managing the grow where I have full control because I'm there every single day versus managing the same strain at a different facility that's 2 provinces away, and they're not listening to me or updating me or keeping in touch, or like it's just like hard to work with this man who just won't work with me. And so we had just gotten into BC here, which is hard to get into for all the way from the East Coast. But I had sent the buyers the dosi cake, and I had sent them like the weed, and they were just like, yeah, this is fire, we want it. So when the batch went over there, it was mixed with a crop that was like, it was our crop and another crop. So the quality was different, and like maybe not to everybody it looked very similar. Like my boss would look at it and go, it's exactly the same. But to somebody like me or you, would be like, no, like I don't want to sell this mid, but I'll sell this good quality. Like some people can see the difference, smell it,
Right.
whatever. So that's what went out. I had to literally face to face that buyer because he's like, I went out and bought a dosi cake, and he's like, it was not what you sent me. So that was hard to talk to, like to just like be the grower and be responsible, but not throw people under the bus, because it's not that. Because I let it go out, right? Like it was in my control, or I thought it was. And so it's stuff like that makes the job harder. But like I
Sure.
said, you take your dumps with your success, and it's not as often. So I find that the job is more rewarding than it is not rewarding.
For sure. Yeah, that's a really great point that you bring up, that just because two people are growing the same strain with the same SOPs and, you know, attempting to mimic the styles as exact as possible, the end product can turn out vastly different.
Yeah. Oh
Maybe it's
yeah.
an environmental factor that's slightly different, or maybe there's an input factor that's slightly different, especially if
Irrigation.
it's,
That was what I noticed
yeah,
was the biggest thing was the different irrigation styles. So a lazy version versus consistent irrigation. Like
sure,
people just it's a labor of love,
right.
hand
Well,
watering.
and the irrigation practices as well, especially if you are in a living soil situation, then the nutrient availability is going to be highly dependent
Yeah.
upon how that irrigation is applied.
Yep.
And so, not only is it just irrigation at that point, it's the overall nutrient density within the root zone and the percentage of different constituents that are making up that nutrient package for the
Yep.
plant. They're all going to be adjusted because irrigation can affect, especially in living soil, right? It can affect the
Yep.
pH of the
Oh
soil.
yeah.
It can
And you got to let it
it can
ride it
affect,
out in living
yeah,
soil. Like it's not like that's what I missed about salt, just being able to
right,
flush and control
right. You
versus
can flush it and reset it.
yeah, like watching Browntown just slowly die before my eyes. Like that was so hard.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
got to
was
be
me coming
really
from like
tough,
strictly going automated salt places, Rockwell, Cocoa, to like, this is living soil? Like,
right? Well, and then
scary.
also this was with like a dual root zone aquaponic
Yeah,
system.
yeah.
I
So we
take it
were
so you
hand
have,
watering in the
right.
fish poop, but
Okay,
um, so yeah, yeah, we were doing a bunch of actually research studies with the government of Canada. So we were maximizing on funding through certain tax benefits that you get for doing R&D. And
sure,
so instead of it costing a lot of money, we ended up, it paid for itself. And that was through doing effluent studies. So we had scientists. I was working with a scientist. We were using actually the dosi cake to replicate, is this making a difference basically by adding this effluent? What's in this poop? We had to send it away for microbial analysis, which is really difficult to get because you can go to your basic cannabis lab or any lab really and get a microbial analysis that'll tell you like your CFU or exactly how much microbials are on something, but it can't tell you what microbes those are. So are they good? Are they
sure.
bad? Like you just don't know. So it was through a university in Halifax, I think, Dalhousie, it's a good popular one, that we got our affluent and our soil, and like the scientists led that whole research project. And then we were actually on a couple of the world aquaponic, the virtual
Sure.
conference too. So the scientist was on there talking about what they found. And what we found, dun, 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 is that there wasn't really any rare or like unique microbe in fish effluent that was doing anything to create like higher yield, higher quality. Basically, any microbial input will help break down what you need and will work the same, whether it's fish poop, worm poop, teas that people brew based on those things, compost, that kind of thing. So it was pretty cool.
That is really cool. I always listen to, or I used to listen to a lot, the Growing with Fishes podcast with
Yep.
Steve Reisner, and I always wanted to try out like the dual root zone planting where you have your fish tank and you just run almost like a
Yep.
thin nutrient film technique with the plant sitting above it with the
Yeah, I can
the
visualize
break.
that diagram right now, dude. Yep,
Yep.
for sure. Me too. I
I feel
wanted to
like a
bring
lot of
one of the
people.
tilapia home when they got rid of the fish farm. I was like, can I have like they're 3 pound fish, right? They're huge. And my fish
Yeah,
guy Gary was like, I'll tell you a sad story, man. He's like, you don't want one of those in your living room because you need a big pool and you'll find it on the ground dead one day, which I did always find lots of dead fish. So
because they'll just hop out of the tanks.
yeah, as soon as they lose oxygen, those suckers are jumping out. And it's aggressive jumping. Like you have to have netting on the our genetics, anyways. The tilapia, so they like a warmer, a warmer,
Yeah.
a warmer water.
Yeah, that's I feel like anybody that hasn't really heard much about aquaponics should go and listen to the Growing with Fishes podcast.
Yes, they are
It's
the experts.
it's a
I
good
had
one.
very basic knowledge of it, honestly. People want me on there. They've asked to be like a speaker and stuff, and I decline because like it's not my forte. Like, yeah, I did that, but it was very ghetto, and it was, yeah, probably not, But it was a good experience.
There's a lot
I
to
love
it.
the fish, actually. I still have a picture of them up.
Nice. Um, well, I have a couple more questions to go through. Um, so I'll ask them and then we'll just go from there. So, with all of the experience that you have had, um, especially it sounds like you've seen some of the practices within the industry that a lot of people might be like, ooh, that's something that I want to avoid, as well as some of the things that you've seen that are fairly successful within the industry and running teams that are highly productive and really helping hone in those different aspects of the grow. What are some of the things that you would like to see change within the cultivation industry?
Honestly, the most important thing I think that needs to change is just what we were talking about earlier, and that's in regards to positive leadership. And so there just needs to be a bigger shift in management and leadership, and that needs to trickle down into productivity. And so I feel like any facility or any industry or any workplace is going to need to incorporate that type of, you know, newer style leadership to get anywhere and to get people to stay. We're seeing more transition and less like staff retention because they're just not being treated properly. And the generation of today is like, fuck you, like they do not give one shit about paying for rent, or like they'll go live in an RV by the river. Like, it's just unreal. Like, people just won't put up with shit. And so that managers need to follow that trend, because it's just like, it's such a waste of a company's money and time to be replacing these people constantly. So it's like, you need to get the right people in and do the right things. You need to pay them properly. No bullshit. Communicate more transparency, honestly. Like, but I don't really see those things changing quickly. So it's just going to be like, that's how I see changes happening, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's where anything's going. I hope so, slowly but surely.
Sure. In the same line of thought, what are some of the pitfalls that you might be seeing in the industry, or perhaps things that are being swept under the rug? Are there any other things there that you're seeing other than what you've talked about?
Pitfalls, I guess, for me would be like regulations. And so the tight regulations and the amount of tax that that is being taken from cannabis is insane. And I know at the basic level from being in it. So here in Canada, you're having to feed all the different provinces separately, like separate buyers. They all have different rules and regulations. You need to know them. You can't mess up at all, and then they're taking all your money. So things are starting to get known, and so you're seeing like leaders in this industry shouting out about it and wanting excise reform, and that's gonna stop a lot of these smaller businesses from being taken out, honestly. And so the pitfall is the changes are coming too slowly, and so companies are just expiring because they can't wait. They can't wait for the changes. So if the people are getting taken out, and it's just not fair. So it's like going to be a monopoly, just like every other industry where there's all these corporations that own everything, and everything's being exported because they don't want to pay the excise tax. So if you like good weed and you want it from this guy, well, you can't get it from this guy because he needs to make money, so he's exporting it to Germany. So any good weed, you're making more money, and I know this for sure. You're making $2 a gram for dank ass weed in Canada domestically versus $4+ internationally at their
Wow.
like American or Australian or euros, right? So it's even more money. So yeah, no excise makes sense.
That does. I feel like supporting the local consumers and community over your trying to get the highest dollar is something that a lot of people should think about because
Yeah,
that's very important.
it is.
So, having been a new grower and trying to, and then successfully entering into the commercial space, what are some what is some advice that you would give to new growers, whether it be in a home grow sense or in a commercial sense?
New growers. So much, so much. The best advice I can give to new growers is to start with good, reputable genetics. And so invest in yourself. So figure out, research, find out, come to me even, come to you, I'm sure, ask where people are buying their genetics and how, because sometimes it's tricky. So I don't mind having those conversations, but I think that's the most important thing because you can get so turned away by having just someone's basement unstable genetics. Like I would give a new grower those and let them know that's what they are, and that this is a good learning curve too, right? Like let's watch for everything, like so there's benefits, but I wouldn't, if you're just doing this on your own and you're like, you want to make your own medicine and you want to learn and get on as quickly as possible, you got to start with good quality stuff, and that's genetics first.
For sure. I agree with that. I think that, genetics always tend to be at the forefront of what's important for a new grower to pay attention to. One thing that I do like to add to that is that I think it's beneficial for a lot of new growers if they have it available to grow a clone rather than a seed. Because
Yeah, that's
clones that are tested and proven, you can have certain expectations on exactly what it should look like. Whereas with seeds,
yeah,
sometimes, even if they're really refined and from a really reputable breeder, there can be different morphologies that the phenotype can take that might throw you off from thinking that it is what you were looking for. But if you grow a clone and you see it grow out and you do it a few times and you can kind of see this is what something that is supposed to produce really well does in my setting and environment, then you can then start to look through seeds and find things that are comparable. So you can go, this is where my baseline was. It's this clone. I know how it grows here. I'm going to start looking through seeds because I do want to try something that's like a grape flavor, or maybe
yeah,
find something that's an OG or a GMO, or just something that you maybe, if it's flavor forward that you're searching for, or a specific cannabinoid profile that you're searching for, you can at least still know what you can do with the setup that you have.
yeah, I agree.
Cool. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, Genevieve. I really appreciate you joining me today. I do like to wrap up the show with a couple of questions that I ask all of my
Cool.
fellow growers. So, what is your favorite strain of all time?
White Widow.
White
I
Wow,
love
right
White
off the
Widow.
bat.
Yeah, right off the bat. I'm not growing White Widow though. I know. I need a good one though. So I just need to invest in my favorite White Widow that I've ever grown is from Amsterdam marijuana seeds out in the Netherlands. That's actually my favorite genetic seed bank. They do their own thing. And they have the best White Widow. I like their White Widow Extreme, it's called. It's just the effect. It, that one I grew so long ago that I was before I was like getting a lab to test anything, so I don't know what the terpenes are on it, but I can guess that limonene is up there because of the euphoria that you experience with it. It's like I haven't felt a lot of strains that give me that, and so I miss it. So I definitely need to invest in getting some seeds.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't had White Widow in probably a decade or
And
more.
skunk, right? Like I love a good skunk.
For sure. Every time I hear skunk, I just can't ever, I can't remember ever having something that did taste like skunk,
Burnt
because the
rubber.
closest thing that the closest thing I can think of is like a good GMO,
Mm.
or like one of the different burger strains from Skunk Master Flex, and
Oh, okay. I've never tried one
you
of
know,
those, but GMO for sure.
yeah. Those are always like, I think that that's what skunk tastes like.
Yeah. Yeah, I encourage you to get out there and buy some White Widow Extreme. It's got
All
a
right.
really unique, like I'd say like a burnt rubber. I still remember like, but almost like lemon, burnt rubber, hazy smell.
That does sound good.
Yeah.
Well, along the same line of questioning, what is your favorite breeder of all time? Or who is your favorite breeder of all time, I should say?
Hard, hard, hard. It'd probably be what I've grown the most of. So I'm trying to think like collectively, like where do I go? Like I've grown a lot of Barney's Farm. I've grown a lot of Dynafem. Kevin Jodrey is also a favorite breeder. I do have some of his genetics, not just from where I worked, but also seeds he's given.
Cool.
Um, I'm trying to think of a Canadian person that I want to plug. Uh, yeah, I'll stick with that.
No, that's totally fine. I feel like sometimes
Ooh,
it's really
in-house
hard to
genetics, black cherry punch.
in-house.
Boom, boom, boom. Oh, Canadian. You know what? I was just talking about this. I'm gonna do a shout out. This is only because it didn't come to my mind. Like, geez, Louise, I've already grown to like in commercial setting. There is a breeder out here, Mother Labs. So I've grown black cherry punch. They got from in-house genetics, I believe. I don't know the whole story of it, but I've grown it in different facilities because these facilities have bought it from them. So they're located in Saskatchewan, which is where I grew up and was born, which is cool.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
if I could ever get a job working under Brian, who is the CEO and founder, or like on their science team as like someone's assistant, I would love that job. Just so
Nice.
how much learning they tissue culture, like banking, like breeding, phenohunting. It's just like imagine going to work and that's what you do every day. I know there's probably
Yeah.
paperwork involved, but
Probably, yeah, definitely. A lot of tracking
yeah. So I'm
of the
gonna
different
say
genetics
they're
and
my
stuff.
favorite because I have experience. They're Canadian. Let's go with that. Mother Labs.
Nice. Yeah, we have tissue culture come up a lot on the podcast because so many people are getting into it, and I think
Yeah,
it's really
really cool
important.
experience.
It is. It's really fun, actually. There's like a lot of calm that you have
Yeah.
to
Okay.
maintain in order to do tissue culture very well, because so much of it is very fine motor skills and patience.
Yeah. Maybe your facility needs me, Nick.
We are so small, but
International. Here I come.
there you go.
Maybe not USA, actually. Never mind.
No,
Cut.
probably not. I
Yeah.
not currently.
Yeah, cut, cut, cut. Yeah. Europe.
Yeah. So, last question then on sort of these wrap up questions is, what is your most memorable cannabis or smoking related experience?
Oh, wow. Most.
You know, some people it'll be their first time smoking, other people
Yeah, I
it'll
mean,
be
really, I
something
mentioned it with
embarrassing or
like that first like joint that my buddy forced down my throat when I was like, I'm gonna kill myself. Like, um, that's pretty out there, I guess. Like that joint saved my life. So, in like a really hopeful but like desperate that that's it, I guess, but in a fun way. I was trying to think of a fun one. I guess it would be that trip. So taking, I called it like the Grand Weed Tour 2018. And that was literally driving down the coast through Washington, Oregon, Northern California. Stopped in Weed, California to look for weed, and they're like, sorry, we don't have any weed, and it's dangerous
Yeah.
for you to be asking that, So I was like, goodbye. Like, probably should have been killed a few times on that trip, but God's with me. Creator, thank you, protecting me. But some of those experiences, I was on Hippie Hill smoking a joint. We missed 420, so like we got there way too late, rolled into town, but we were like, so what? A little bit later, rolled in and still was like very solo, but smoked my own joint. That's probably one of the
Nice.
most memorable. Like that's history. That's our history has been. So that's cool. Maybe it's different for people who live closer, but like I just thought that was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area, and it was cannabis is a huge part of the culture there,
Yeah, it's
and
so neat.
it is. And yeah, smoking up on Hippie Hill is definitely something people should experience if they
Yeah,
haven't.
I feel grateful for having experienced the little that I've experienced in the last 8 or 9 years. I am not an OG or a legacy grower. I am a noob at this. I just happen to like whip in and like work my way up and win some stuff. But honestly, like I am so grateful to have gotten and had the blessings that I've had in such a short amount of time. So it's cool.
Well, I feel like your experience speaks volume for your own capabilities as a grower. And, a lot of people can learn a lot from yourself if they do want to enter into the cannabis industry. And, I just want to thank you so much for your time today, telling your story and getting this information out there to people. Because, like I like to say, getting this information out there to the community helps us all grow together.
Yeah.
And that's the way we grow, just like the title of the podcast.
Yeah.
So, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Nick.